Okay, now we're on chapter 11, which introduces the Messiah, the Shepherd Messiah. If you delve into the pages of history, specifically Josephus, Suetonius, the writers of antiquity, you find out that Jesus was not the only one people thought to be the Messiah or that claimed to be the Messiah. Before Jesus, there was a fellow named Athronges. It's been nearly a full year since the marriage of Mahler and his wife Rachel, and 5 years since the death of Herod the Great and the dissolution of the government's iron fist. And the countryside suffered still from the thieves and the would-be kings. Upon his deathbed, Herod had divided the kingdom and given each of 4 parts, one to his sister and the other 3 to his 3 sons, and it threw the people into confusion and provided fertile ground for the revolutions and the seditions, the most prominent of which was one spearheaded by Athronges, known to the people as the Shepherd Messiah. The province called Judea, the heartbeat of Israel, wherein stands the temple, had been given to Herod's son Archelaus. Galilee went to his son Antipas, and the northernmost region was bequeathed to his eldest son Philip. It's beautiful in the north. It's a place where the river Jordan has its beginning, emerging from the very stones of the earth, a jeweled piece of Yahweh's creation that sparkles forth in the form of creeks, waterfalls, and all things green. Curiously, it's also an area of the world considered sacrosanct by the Romans as a home of their god Pan. Further complicating the political landscape was the fact that it was the age of the predicted Messiah. All were waiting, expecting the arrival of a king greater than David. There were no less than a dozen claimants to the title. In fact, Athronges among them. The people thought it probable that it could be Athronges because of his uncommon size and strength and because of his heroic deeds and relentless pursuit of justice. Whenever the robbing and plundering of a caravan preceded the giving of anonymous gifts to the poverty-stricken, Athronges was suspected. Whenever the daughter of someone of royal ancestry was kidnapped and ransomed and magnanimous gifts to the needy followed, the name of Athronges the Shepherd Messiah was rolling off the tongues of all those who heard of the deed. Whenever a criminal went unpunished for an act of evil, the people soon could depend upon some type of misfortune befalling the purveyor via the righteous hand of a ghostly rider at midnight. It was far too late to be traveling. Mahler was making his way along the Damascus highway in search of an inn when 2 men approached. The moon was resting atop the westward rolling hills, and it was strong over the plains of Megiddo, and it illuminated enough of their dress, these 2 people, to reveal that the men were common hill people. Their voices could be heard before they could be seen. The halting pace of their walk and the way their eyes shifted back and forth between the 2 of them suggested that their intentions were not pure. "Hold there!" one of them shouted out. "Hold, a shekel for the cause!" Mahler ignored them and attempted to pass by without meeting their eyes. One of them blocked his way. "Hold, priest," he said. "No one passes without paying the toll." Mahler squared his feet. "What are you talking about? What toll? There's no toll on this road." "No one passes without paying the toll. I've passed this way many times in service of the synagogues, and I've never been asked to pay a toll. How much money is this toll anyway, and for what cause?" Both men laughed. The one blocking the way said, "How much do you have?" "That is how much the toll is, and it is for the cause of the 2 people who might let you pass once the toll has been paid." Mahler's Roman short sword flashed. It had not been visible beneath his robes, and it caught the thieves by surprise and delayed their reactions. Its arc slashed one of them across the face. But a surprise also awaited Mahler. Things were happening in fractions of seconds as the 2 thieves also displayed weapons, as the 2 dueled against the one. Mahler's only experience with weaponry had come as a child when he would pester the temple guards for swordsmanship training. He was energized and terrified all at the same time. The sword had become so heavy he could barely grip it, and his lungs heaved for air. You cannot be angry, the guards had taught him. You cannot be frightened. You've got to be thinking, strategizing. It's a game. The moment it ceases to become a game, the moment you allow anger or fear to overtake you, is the moment you have lost that fight. And here in this moment, he had lost the fight. Something came down hard on the back of his head. In the next moment, he was looking up at the 2 men, a sword point pressed firmly to his throat. One of the thieves was searching the folds of his cloak. "Aha! What is it we have here?" he said. holding up Mahler's purse. "It appears you have money after all." There was a hum and a thick sound, and the one holding Mahler at sword point dropped the sword and stood stiff, then collapsed under legs that crumpled beneath him. An arrow was protruding from his back. It was followed by a great sound and purple robes riding upon the wind and thundering hooves tearing at the road and throwing bits of night into the air. The man riding the lead horse was so big his feet nearly touched the ground. A round platinum moon danced with subtleness, and a golden diadem fashioned upon the big man's head. Golden rings adorned every finger. The bow that had delivered the arrow was still in his hand. The arrow must have pierced a lung. The thief lay face down, gasping, and it left Mahler with a weakness the temple guards had warned about. It occurs in battle, an impulsive need to help your enemies. You must harden your heart against it, they had warned. Your duty is to kill your enemies. If you help to heal them, they will only recover to kill you and instruct their children to kill you. It is the way of the world. It is the way of God. The riders reined in their horses and formed a circle around Mahler and the thieves. The thief with Mahler's purse placed his feet as if to run, looked right, looked left as the riders nudged their horses inward to close all pathways of escape. The dying thief had momentary hope in his eyes. Tales abound about thieves helping other thieves, but such was not the case here. The big man, with arms large and hanging like those of an ape, slung the spent bow over his shoulder and dismounted, which took no more than the simple swing of one enormous leg over the head of the horse, and thumped in heavy strides to over where the dying thief lay in the dust of the road, and with his bare hands broke the thief's neck. Even then the unfortunate soul did not die right away. He struggled ever the more for breath until at last his face froze in silence. The horsemen had their bows loaded and aimed at the standing thief's chest, close range, strung back to cheek level, the bronze tips of their arrows catching glints of moonlight. The big man lumbered up to Mahler, who was by then sitting up, catching his breath, holding his throat as blood collected on his hand and seeped through his fingers. The big man knelt. "Let me see," his voice rumbled out. It came from a triangular opening in a thick silver and black beard. It came as a gentle sound. Now, it is all right. Let me see." He moved Mahler's hand and caught the blood with his purple robes. There, it's all right, young priest. Superficial only. There we go. Just let me see." Mahler felt like he was a child again, and that he was in the care of his father. Who is this man of power, he thought. There we go. It's all right. It's all right now. It's barely a bit of a scrape. Courage now. He reached out with his enormous hand and touched the wound. "Say something. I want to hear you speak. Anything. I just want to make sure you were able." Mahler shook his head no. Now, it's only blood. Say something. I think you are able, but I want to make sure your throat is not damaged. The big man was speaking in Hebrew, the language of God, understandable to Mahler, though the accent was thick, being a strange kind of Hebrew, not at all the formal and proper linguistic sing-song of the temple hierarchy. It had more of an easy quality to it, folksy, with an intonation common to the Judean hill people who spoke it, tinged with its own mix of errant words, as if the language were evolving. It was not likely that the remaining thief could understand it. Mahler could barely understand it, the common tongue being Aramaic, the mix of Babylonian and Hebrew that grew out of the exile and the mixing of races, of theologies, of languages. "Thank you," Mahler finally said after a full and patient effort. "There we go," said the big man. "Good. You can talk. Good." The opening in the beard seemed as if chiseled from stone. A sort of pasted-on, upside-down smile, the only evidence of a mouth being the bottom lip, the bottom of the triangle, sunburned and crusted. "I'm not much of a warrior, I guess," said Mahler. Every appendage in his body seemed to be trembling. "To the contrary," said the big man. "We were watching from the hilltops. You did admirably well." He gestured with an enormous hand. Mahler had never seen a hand that big. "Your swordsmanship was quite impressive," said the big man. Where did a priest of Yahweh learn to handle a sword like that?" "Oh, my good sir, you give me too much credit, I fear," said Mahler. "My father is Matthias, the high priest who pulled down Caesar's golden eagle from over the temple gate. The temple guards taught me. They were Macedonians." "Truly? You are the son of Matthias, the high priest who pulled down Caesar's golden eagle and hacked it to pieces?" "Undeniably," said Mahler proudly. "Mahler is my name, Mahler of Matthias." You are then a descendant of Aaron, brother of Moses, the first high priest. For certain, acknowledged Mahler. My father's father was Margalothus, who was a descendant of Bilgah, who was, as you know, was one of the 24 original offshoots of Aaron. I am humbled to be of service to the son of the great Matthias, the big man said, the voice rumbling out of the opening pause, then took on the tone of a reprimand. However, let it be understood that the proper way to address your Messiah is with the title of Lord, not my good sir. Mahler was stunned. The man who had rescued him was Athronges, the Shepperd Messiah. Of course, the purple robes, the crown, the enormous hands. The man who was more of a god than a man. Who else could it be? My apologies, my lord. I didn't know, truly. It is I who am humbled. Athronges again rebuked Mahler. There is one other thing you need to know. It is a punishable offense to refer to that mixed blood offshoot of Herod, who now sits on the throne as king. He is to be spoken of by his given name only, Archelaus. He is no more of a king than you are. There is only one king, the shepherd king, the Messiah, the one foretold by the prophet Micah, the true king of the Jews. And I am that king. I am the one destined to be anointed. Mahler bowed, my lord. At hearing the adulation, Athronges turned kindly in his expression, and it was overpowering. Calm yourself now. It is all right, he said. You had no way of knowing, but to those who know who I am, and do not acknowledge me, and who dare not to bend a knee to me, a curse it shall be that shall lie over their heads. It is the unforgivable sin. He who denies me, I shall deny him before God, and God will thenceforth deny him from this day forward into eternity. My lord, it shall not happen again, said Mahler, and I thank you, my lord Athronges, for saving my life. Had you not come along, I would surely be dead. Mahler could remember only one time in his life when he had felt such overpowering relief and such dependence upon another human being. He had been a child, barely past infancy. A bantam rooster had attacked him, humorous now, but terrifying to one so young, as the bird came at him, screeching and squawking, feathers batting, talons slashing. His father shooed the creature away with no more than a calm voice and 2 hands the rooster respected. Everyone watching was laughing, except his father. His father squatted low to be eye to eye with his son and said, "Are you all right, my son?" The young Mahler nodded that he was, and his father's next words were reassurance as he pointed to the men laughing, understanding that there was a wound deeper than the scratches given by the rooster. Don't you worry about those men over there. Truth is, those roosters give me a start, too. He patted Mahler on the back and nodded toward the men. Someday, you will be a man twice what they are. His father had no way of knowing at the time, but that pat, that moment, had been one of the most powerful memories of Mahler's boyhood. It was a moment that sealed the two of them as father and son and established his father as the protector and mentor. Athronges stood up, and it was then that Mahler saw how truly large he was. The legendary Goliath could not have been any taller. Athronges put both hands down and helped Mahler struggle to his feet, then turned to the remaining thief, still standing, purse still in his hand. "My lord Athronges," the thief said and bowed, "King of the Jews." "Now," said Athronges. His eyes were hard, and that frightened the thief more than the bronze-tipped arrows of the archers. "Perhaps you can remind me of what is to be done with a thief by the law of Moses? I can't seem to remember. What was it now? Something about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? Perhaps you can refresh my memory." The thief bowed a second time, trembling visibly. "My lord, he stammered, "please, this is not what it seems. I am fortunate that it is you, my lord Athronges, who came upon this incident, for you will be fair above all others. Everyone knows that the Shepherd Messiah has the wisdom of Solomon. You are the one who has been anointed by God. You are the one who will free us from the bonds of Archelaus and imperial Rome, and as such I am sure you will be able to see through the error of appearances." The thief held the purse out. "This is my purse." He pointed at Mahler. "The young priest stole it from us. We were only attempting to recover what is ours." Do you know what happens to those who lie to the Messiah? Tiny gurgles of laughter were coming out of the Messiah's mouth, a malevolent chuckle that could barely be heard, that sounded like little belches. "My lord," the thief pointed to Mahler, "you must believe me. It was he who took the purse from us. We were simply taking back what is ours." The chiseled upside-down smile widened, and the tiny gurgles grew louder, hardly recognizable as laughter, sounding almost like Athronges was coughing or clearing his throat. "So," he said, "you are a thief and a liar. Is that what you were telling me?" Athronges' hair was full and wavy past his shoulders, befitting a Jew of holy prominence, but the top of his head, most of it hidden by the diadem, was hairless, and the weak and wiry strands struggled out of it, and they were all the more noticeable because of it. "My lord, please, you must believe me." Athronges moved forward and stood a forearm's length in front of the thief. The thief tried to move backward and turned his head to make movements to run. But there was no place to go, only in the midst of the encircled horses and the riders with their loaded bows, all aimed at the thief's chest. Athronges spread his feet, then crossed his arms. His body parts didn't quite fit together the way they do with most people. His torso was way too thick for his legs, and his arms too long, and his hands too big, and his head too small. He swaggered when he walked, but not out of arrogance, more out of necessity, as if the upper part of his body couldn't quite move without first being initiated by the lower. Words of authority were coming out of the opening. "Return the purse to its rightful owner, right now." "But my lord," the top of the thief's head came barely to chest level of Athronges. Athronges nodded his head to secure the demand. The very power of the gesture compelled the thief to act, and he handed the purse back to Mahler, his arm shaking. "Very good," said Athronges, and stretched out his hand to the thief, as if offering forgiveness. At first, that's what Mahler thought it was, a conciliatory gesture, to thank the thief, and to let him know that things had now been equalized. But the thief knew otherwise. His entire body shook in fear. "Please, my lord, please. I have returned it. There is no need for this. He has his property back." "Your hand," said Athronges. "Please, my lord." "Your hand." Athronges' hand completely enclosed the thief's hand. The thief grimaced. His knees quivered. There was a sound of bone crunching, and more of the silent gurgles coming from Athronges' mouth. In Athronges' face there was no indication of effort or strain, only the chiseled-out smile and the malevolent spurts. He was two people, defender of the innocent, ruthless arbiter of justice. Athronges released his grip to reveal a crumpled right hand, twisted with fingers poking out at awkward angles from a swollen mass of purple. The thief held it, moaning, and dropped first to his knees, then to the ground altogether, moaning and rolling to and fro. Said Athronges, standing tall above him, a symbol of righteous authority. "Moses said, if your right hand offends you, remove it." Recompense having been given, the riders lowered their bows, and Athronges turned to Mahler. The triangular opening and the strong eyes exuded compassion once more. "My young priest, my good fellow, it isn't by no accident that we met." "Indeed?" said Mahler. "Yes," said Athronges. There was a large flat rock close by. Athronges sat on it to be eye to eye, at eye level with Mahler, and he put his hands on his knees. "You see, I am in search of an ancient artifact," he said. "This particular artifact contains power greater than any on earth. It possesses the ultimate power. It is a crown meant to adorn the head of the Messiah. And you can get it for me." "Me? I know of no such object." "Ah, but you have access to it. You are a priest of Yahweh, are you not?" "Yes, but—" "You are a priest of the temple, are you not?" "Yes, but—" "The lost crown of King David, I am told, has been found and resides in the temple's inner chamber. You shall get it for me," said Athronges. Mahler was stunned. "There is no such thing," he said, when words finally came. "The lost crown of King David is only a legend. Even if it does exist, I could not steal it from God's holy presence. Not for anybody. The crown exists. It waits for the Messiah. It waits for me. Forgive me, my lord Athronges, but you expect me to steal from God? You are not stealing. You are retrieving. This is no coincidence that you came here to us. Don't you see? God has sent you to me. It is God's will that you retrieve the crown so that it may reside where it belongs, on the head of God's Messiah." Forgive my boldness, but it is a child's tale. My father used to tell me that story when I was a boy. The crown was lost the very day King David lay with Bathsheba. "It is much more than a child's tale," broke in Athronges. "As the story goes—" "Well, you know the story. You are a priest and a scribe." "Yes," said Mahler. "I've copied it and recopied it many times. I could probably recite it word for word." The things King David had done, his adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband, displeased the Lord so greatly that he sent the prophet Nathan to David with a story. There were two men in a certain town, the story begins. One was rich, the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had only one little ewe that he had raised from a tiny lamb. It had grown up with the poor man and his children, even slept in his arms. It was as a daughter to the poor man and his wife, and to his children. Now, one day, when a traveler came to the rich man, instead of preparing a meal for the traveler with one of his own sheep, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the traveler. David burned with anger at the story and said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this should die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a cruel thing and had no pity." It was then that the prophet Nathan pointed an accusatory finger at David and cried, "You are that man." And as the story goes, the mighty king withered under the rebuke. God's punishment was that David's wives be given over to the one who was closest to him, and that the child given in sin by Bathsheba should die, which in fact came to pass in 7 days. That day of the prophet Nathan's visitation was the last day David saw his crown. The Lord took it away, it is said, because David no longer deserved to wear it, it being a symbol of fairness and purity. And that was the day, they say, that the Lord cursed the crown with a Shekinah fire to protect it from those who would use it for purposes of evil bent. But to those with a pure heart, those whose souls are free from sin, those who would use the crown's power only for righteousness, and there is only but one, even more power will be given. Another crown was made for the king, but it was forged by the hands of man. It was heavier, prettier, hammered out of solid gold, but it wasn't the same, and it had no power. To this day, the real crown waits to be discovered. It waits for the Messiah. "The man to whom you refer, I am he," said the mighty Athronges. "But it is a child's tale, a metaphor only. It does not exist," reiterated Mahler. "It exists, and it belongs on my head." "But my lord, if the story is true, and if you are not," Athronges' eyes stopped Mahler in mid-sentence as they focused on his implied impudence, but then softened and became fatherly once more. "Bring it to me," he said gently. "Bring it to me, and I shall make you a general in my army in the conquest of Rome." He clawed at his beard. It was what he did when puzzling over an issue, and pointed an enormous finger at Mahler. "Yes, that is what I am going to do. I am going to make you a general. The son of the one who pulled down Caesar's golden eagle deserves no less an honor." Then he rose and put his hand on Mahler's upper back, a gentle hand. "Courage now, you will do fine. God would not have chosen you for this task if you were not up to it." And he stood and embraced him and kissed him both cheeks to seal the agreement. "You wish to conquer Rome?" asked Mahler. "In time," responded Athronges. "All things in their own time. For now, we will be content to drive the invaders from our land, and to restore Israel, and to displace Archelaus with Israel's true king." "Meaning you?" asked Mahler, with a touch of the impudence returning, regretting it the instant he said it. Athronges let it slide. "Did you know that Archelaus isn't even a Jew, yet he holds the title of king? He's the son of Herod the Great, no more, no less, and Herod the Great was the son of Antipater of Idumea, no more, no less. By blood, Antipater was no more a Jew than he is a Roman. Antipater was a mere servant to the Maccabees and ascended to the throne only because of his allegiance to Pompey. Pompey put him on the throne, not the Jews, not God." "My lord, forgive my insolence. It is not intended as such, only to help and inform. But whoever sits on the throne sits there by approval of Caesar. You should know that. Even if one were successful in displacing Archelaus, still, in the end, it must be with the endorsement of Caesar." Athronges' eyes opened wide, and he pointed upward with his index finger as emphasis. "Ah, see? You are already proving helpful. This is to be a conquest done with both intelligence and power, and you shall help me with the intelligence and with the strategy. The crown shall give the power. It possesses a Shekinah fire, the very breath of God. None of my enemies will be able to stand before me once I wear that crown. Forgive me, my lord Athronges, but it is foretold that the true king of Israel will come from the line of David. Easy tones of reassurance passed through the triangle. King David was my grandfather, 26 generations removed. His crown should be mine by ascension. Mahler bowed. Forgive me, my lord. There is one question I must ask before giving my allegiance and stealing the crown for you. Retrieving the crown, corrected Athronges. Remember, it is mine by birthright. All the while, the thief was on the ground, writhing in pain. Mahler cast him a nervous glance. But all others continued to ignore him because the mighty Athronges had dispensed justice. If I may, my lord, continued Mahler, Judas of Ezekias is also from the line of David, and also claims to be the true king of Israel, also claims to be the Messiah. How do we know which one of you speaks the truth? Which one of you is the one anointed by God? Athronges gestured toward the horizon, visible in the night only because it was illuminated by an eerie glow. The false messiahs, you will know them by their fruits. As we speak, Sepphoris is in flames at the hands of Judas of Ezekias. So ask yourself, would the true Messiah burn your cities? Athronges was one of those rare souls that captures passion with every word, simply because the eyes will it so. They wrapped their target in comfort. The opening in the beard widened in softness. Be a general in the Messiah's army. Change the world. When history writes itself of our cause, the name of Athronges the Shepperd Messiah will grace every page. It'll be read 10,000 years from now by 10,000 people. Let the name Mahler of Matthias be there alongside it. He put his hand again on Mahler's upper back. Mahler pondered in silence before answering. My wife is with child. I must consider my responsibility to my family. I am only recently married. God will protect you when in the service of God's work. Perhaps. But I also have temple duties requiring my attention, and my father-in-law has entrusted me with duties of his estate while he is away in Jerusalem on matters of the Sanhedrin. Athronges stroked his beard. Your father-in-law, truly? A member of the Sanhedrin, the governing body of Israel? This just gets better and better. So he is one of the 72 that dispenses Hebrew law and justice. It is indeed fortunate we met. What is his name? Mahler hesitated, but the eyes of Athronges were strong. He is called Eli, Mahler finally said. Eli. I have heard of this Eli. He is wealthy. You married well. God has indeed blessed us by directing you here so that our paths would cross. It will be good to have such strong connections. Return to settle your affairs, then bring the crown to me, and be a general in my army. Athronges pulled from one of his fingers one of the golden rings. Here, take this. We conduct our warfare from hidden places in the forests and the hills. Show this, and you will be taken safely to me. As Mahler was walking away, Athronges turned his attention again to the thief. The thief was still there, but no longer writhing, no longer whimpering. A measure of relief had settled in after the initial pain and shock, leaving the misshapen purple mass to throb in rhythm with the beat of his heart. Such secondary pain is almost a pleasant thing in comparison. Mahler did not look, thinking of it as superstition if he did. A temple priest is taught not to revel in the misfortune of others. He nonetheless listened intently to what Athronges was saying to the thief. By the law of Moses, if your right hand offends you, it must be removed, and heard renewed screams from the thief. Finally, Mahler did stop and look, and Athronges, though a sword hung from his belt, though the sword would have been the most effective way of removing the thief's hand, had chosen a different method, one to better serve his reputation of great strength. As Mahler turned to watch, anyone would have done so. The human mind forces itself in its macabre curiosity to watch the horrific. He saw Athronges gripping the thief's wrist and wringing it as one would wring a chicken's neck. It caused the little spurts to come from Athronges' mouth as full-blown laughter, as bone and muscle and flesh tore and popped. In less time than it took to draw a second breath, Athronges had the appendage loose and was waving it in the air like a victory branch. Blood was pouring from the jagged stub of the thief's forearm. Take care of that thing before he bleeds to death, Athronges told his men, having in his voice a casualness that was chilling, and he threw the hand for the jackals to take. It was twisting through the air. It went twisting, trailing beads of blood behind it, forming little concentric patterns in the moonlight before thumping down somewhere in the darkness 50, 60 feet away. The thief screamed again, but it was a different sound, not of pain, but of seeing the jackals coming to eye it, their formless shadows circling, making cautious movements toward it. One of Athronges' men began to unwrap his tinder and his flint to start a fire so that the wound could be sealed by hot metal, while another dismounted and began to tie tourniquet bandages around the stub. Said Athronges, and addressing those who stared in disbelief, "It is not so hard to believe that I can do these things," he said, "for God has given me his own strength, and once I have the crown on my head, strength will be greater still, greater than that of the gods of Rome, and the cause will be unshakable." He gestured for the others to dismount and gestured for them to make a circle around him. "Come, let us gather together and pray." He waved Mahler over to be included in the circle and motioned for the man starting the fire to come as well, and the one who was tying the tourniquet to come as well, though the tourniquet was only half completed, though the stub would continue to spurt blood. "Come, for a moment." He stuck his sword in the dirt and dropped to one knee and bowed his head. The others knelt and bowed. Mahler did the same as the thief's life essence collected on the ground. "Lord, we come to you in humility, for none is greater than you. Goodness has triumphed here today. Evil has been adjudicated. In like manner, we ask for your strength to drive out the Romans and take back the land that is yours, that you gave to us, your chosen people. And give us also the strength to take back the land of the Romans, and to make also that our land, as did Joshua, with the land of the Canaanites, the very soil upon which we kneel, which was once ours years and years ago. With you, O Lord, as the head of our army, how can we lose? If Moses, leading a weakened group of slaves, can kill 1,000 Egyptian soldiers in their flight to freedom, and if Joshua can kill 6 million Canaanites in the conquest of the Promised Land, and if David can slay a giant twice his size with nothing more than a stone, should we worry about a simple Roman eagle? Nay, we worry not, for you are with us, and we thank you, O great Lord, for we know we are your chosen people. El Mechan Amen, God, our faithful King. El Mechan Amen, rumbled the men in unison. Then it was that Mahler of Matthias, the man who took a vow never to bow before any false god, walked over and sank to one knee and said, O Lord Athronges, the one anointed by God, I give to you my full allegiance and service, however you see fit to use it. From what I have seen here today, you could be none other than the Messiah. I am your servant. And he became one of many who recognized the Shepherd King as the incarnation of the long-awaited Savior of Israel. Some of the Israelites had gone so far as to assert that their Shepherd Messiah was of the direct seed of Yahweh, and that his mother had received that deed in her sleep, not to be outdone by the Romans and their claims of Caesar Augustus being of divine origin, his mother Adia having received the seed of the god Jupiter while she slept. Before mounting his horse, Athronges stretched out his hand so that Mahler could kiss the ring that was most prominent, the messianic symbol, the interlaced triangles, involution, evolution, descending matter, ascending matter. Mahler did so without hesitation and without touching Athronges, because he was unclean, having just battled with the two thieves. It would not do at all to touch the one anointed by God while unclean. The crown, reminded Athronges, looking down from his horse, do not disappoint me. Mahler nodded in the affirmative. The thief was crying out in what was the worst of his agony, because Athronges' men were completing the cauterization. They had cut off the hanging strands of muscle, tendons, and blood vessels, and were laying the flat side of the heated sword against the evened-out stub. Out there in the night and the dust, flies were gathering and buzzards were circling, their black wings like flecks in the moonlight. One of the jackals lunged forward and grabbed something and loped away. And the buzzards screeched and fought with one another over a piece of it that one of them had managed to snatch. And Athronges and his men merged with the shadows of the night, ghosts into the blackness of the trees and rocks, leaving the thief now to fend for himself without a right arm. A man without a right arm is a man useless, and for some reason that bothered Mahler. So he did something completely out of character for any rational human being, something utterly foolish. He gave the thief the contents of his purse anyway, not all of it, but enough so that the maimed man could establish himself in safety without having to depend upon those who would abuse him. The thief hobbled away down the road in the opposite direction, weak from loss of blood, humiliated to the point of ruin, limping as though it were his legs too that had been mutilated, and confused beyond measure at this deed of unrequited kindness. And Mahler made his way to Jerusalem to procure the crown. He prayed as he walked, asking Almighty Yahweh to take away this strange weakness that had overtaken him, the cowardice that had caused him to give money to a man that had nearly killed him.